Okay, back on the Stellify podcast today is someone I could have spoken to for hours and hours the first time around. In fact, I enjoyed that conversation so much that I couldn't wait to book Michael in for a part 2 immediately. If you don't know, Michael Wann is the creator of Susquehanna Alchemy, a body of work that weaves together history, synchronicity, symbolism, and personal transformation in a way that few others can. Michael's unique ability to connect seemingly unrelated dots into a cohesive and mind-bending narrative is why our first discussion was such an incredible chat. Today, we're going to be picking up where we left off, diving even deeper into the hidden architecture of reality, the forces shaping our world, and how we can navigate this strange and beautiful place with much more awareness, curiosity, and sovereignty. And astrology is going to play a big part, I believe, in our conversation. So, Michael, welcome back, brother. I really loved chatting with you the first time around. I felt so comfortable. It was a great chat. So I appreciate you coming back on, my brother.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for the that introduction was a nice entrance. You know, it's nice to walk into a space and be well received. So I appreciate that. And I too am. I've been looking forward to this conversation, this part 2, or I almost see it like a bookend from our previous conversation. So hopefully we will cover some new territory today, but then also link it into what was opened up the last time we recorded, which I checked my day timer before coming in, and it was 55 days ago, which was when.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah. And we started going down this path prior to, you pushing the record button, but I wanted to save it for our recorded conversation. And what I'd like to share with you or just introduce is, just a way which I kind of frame up the experience of my life, of living my life. Quick pivot before I come back to that. In the introduction, you talked a lot about Susquehanna Alchemy and the getting down to the nuts and bolts of how reality is created and so forth. Just to be crystal clear, my own internal motivation for any type of inquiry or something I'm going to go research is always immensely selfish. I'm like, how can this help me better within this mystery, this experience of being alive? It's not just let me figure this out, as much as like, where the hell am I? How does this work? And if maybe I do a little bit more, maybe if I could see how it works a little bit better, there's how does that affect the experience, I suppose?
Absolutely.
And so with that being said, an area which I think, personally, I put a lot of attention to, maybe in a different way, which is not than maybe other people do, and definitely not in a way which is done or talked about frequently. And it's the concept of time. And the language which we use to have conversation, English is, this is true for any language. There are concepts which are difficult to articulate because the language does not necessarily have a precise vocabulary to do so. An example of what I'm saying is, I think I read this somewhere, like in the ancient Persian culture, like when the Persian rugs were the most sought after luxury on earth, it was said that there's 100 different shades of blue, words for the hundreds different shades of blue within the culture. And to take what maybe us in the modern world think of as like maybe like 4 shades. You got dark blue and you got light blue and you got periwinkle blue, and you got like this just like just a few different variations of blue, because that culture had articulated both in in the color, but then in the language of all of these different shades of the same sort of thing, blue, that it allowed a whole lot more dexterity, at least on the level of creating rugs. So I want to bring that back to this idea of time. We don't really have in English, like it's clunky to kind of talk about time from a more subtle level, because we just have like very gross, and when I mean gross, like big, like not fine or nuanced words. And so so the concepts, like to build upon where we're going to go in the conversation. All right, take steps back before I can answer the question. Is so when I'm talking about time, like there's this one idea of there is no such thing as time. There's only the present moment. And there's an absolute truth to that. Like there is just the present moment, like in reality or in experiential reality, we're only at one moment, like, it's always just that present moment. Like, yes, that's an accurate description, but there is undoubtedly a lag, like a space between 2 events. And that's time as well. Like when we think about time, and that's the type of time I'm interested in, like, which captures my curiosity, because for the most part, our human experience occurs linearly. Like, I woke up from yesterday and 2 days ago this happened, and tomorrow I'm going to be dealing with the consequences of yesterday. Like it's linear, you can see. So yes, there's the present moment, and then there's the lag, or the time between any 2 events. And when by bringing in a real kind of like a microscope in terms of looking at life experience, in terms of these bookends of 2 events with a lag in between, this is something that could be done anywhere within a seeming linear experience, through life experience. And you can look at any 2 bookends, like moments in time, and then maybe get a feel as to what was that quality, what was happening. And it allows like a different level of maybe meeting life, yourself, and so forth. And this is all going to tie into astrology in a moment, but we're going to build up to it. So that being said, we spoke, our first conversation was 55 days ago. And as I began to ease into the preparation for the conversation we're having right now, like this was just yesterday or the day before, I'm like, oh, I got this coming up, and thinking about, what was our last conversation like? And then that kind of unfolded more so as like, what all has happened in life since then? Because now I've got bookends. I've got 2 very clear, like there was this time and there was that time. There was like, oh yeah, we started a conversation right then, June 8th in the Gregorian calendar system. And now we're having the second end today. And as I looked at that 55-day period, it's almost a completely different life or experience. I'm a different person than who I was then. Yeah. And I don't mean that like in a grandiose, like every day, you can't step in the same river twice. I'm not talking about it philosophically. I'm talking about like literally, and I had no idea this was going to happen.
Right. Okay.
But 55 days ago, like people who've left my life, people who've come into my life, experiences that happened in that window, like all of these sort of things. So I'm kind of like, encapsulating all of those that period, that chapter. This is immensely like individual and personal. This is really just for me. And now that I'm sharing it with you, it is me and you. But I think that the conversation might be a little bit more strong for me than it was for you, because you probably have more of these than I do. You asked me, how am I doing? And I'm really kind of looking at it as that 55-day period was like that was like a lot has happened. A lot has happened in my personal life. And so there's part of me which is immensely like delighted that, all right, we're going to bookend it right now, because now that one is coming to an end. And now I'm going to step into this other thing. And at least for a like a way of approaching what it means to be alive, to be human, and have this sort of thing, it at least gives me an opportunity to frame up like that portion of time and experience, and like, these are the lessons I learned, and these are the people I met, or so forth, and put it into the next iteration. So yeah, I'm doing well. I am very contemplative of all that has happened in the space between our conversations, and anticipatory of what is going to be happening on the back end, or what starts tomorrow.
Yeah, well, it's great that you're here. I obviously appreciate your time. The irony of saying time, it is the present moment, and I'm honored to share this present moment with you, because right now, and this is something I always say to my clients as well when they're dealing with anxiety and worries and things like that, there is only right now. And right now is a beautiful moment for me, because I get to share it with you, having this conversation. I'm very much looking forward to taking me to school. Do treat me like a 5-year-old when it comes to the astrology, won't you? Because this will have to be a slow
Right. We're going to go and we're going to build this up. This is a build which we're doing. So, and it begins with the foundation. And the foundation is the most significant for anything that's being built. And so when we're dealing with concepts or ideas, the most important thing, if you happen to be the one who's like, okay, this is new for me, let me build up on this concept, that there can't be any assumptions. And if you realize you have an assumption, or if you're unclear of what exactly something may mean, or what I'm implying is that has to be, at the moment, like let's make certain that there's no air pockets. I would call that an air pocket where there's an assumption, because eventually that's going to settle.
Yeah, okay.
This, to me, this concept of what we're going to be talking about is fundamental for understanding the collective human experience right now, because the way the indoctrination systems work is that everyone has been given all of this kind of information which we build upon, but it was given to more or less the 7-year-old version of yourself, where you are intellectually developed enough to learn the concepts, but you weren't necessarily intellectually mature enough to begin to ask questions, be like, well, I don't understand. And so what that means is so much of how we collectively and as individuals frame up our experiential reality, we don't even realize how we're framing it up. We don't realize that it's even a frame. You're like, what do you mean framing it up? I'm not framing anything up. I'm like, well, actually you are. You have just no idea that you are, and you don't even understand how you're framing it up. But because that framework is not built on actual solid ground, it's not solid. It can fall over. And because of that, we can be more easily manipulated, influenced, because we're not standing on a solid understanding.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
And that is this notion of like time and cycles.
Yeah, it intrigues me a lot, this, Michael, actually, because the illusion of time is something I struggle to get my head around. I've opened this up to people in the past and said, "Oh, well, time's an illusion," but then they say, "Well, and what do you mean by that?" And I've struggled to describe that properly. You know, I know that we can slow time down. You know, I could literally meditate, and my time will slow down. If I'm busy, it'll go quick. If I'm stressed, it'll go quick. You know, so I know there's elements of my being and my awareness will alter the speed of time. And I understand also that my memory, although not going to be 100%, because I don't think our memories are 100%, that will give me a concept of the time, the linear, if you like, of understanding where, you know, when I was 8, this happened to me, or 12, this happened to me, or we went on holiday this time, or whatever. But I'd struggle to describe the illusion. Why is it an illusion?
So let's lean into that for a little bit, because there's a lot there. So you had, and it points to this idea of why it's confusing, or like why it might be difficult for you to articulate. It's because we don't have the language to do so. Like built into English is not like a whole bunch of concepts and cliches and stuff which talk about what you're describing. So because there's no way to articulate it, or it's very difficult to do so, it just remains in this like nebulous, I don't know what it is, and you just kind of tuck it away. But there's a there. And the first thing I want to point out in what you shared is you described 2 things which are both objective and subjective. You said, I've noticed that depending upon, let's say, what your interest is in what you're doing, or what have you, like the lag between events can feel like a whole, like really long or really short. It can pass quickly. Yeah. So again, this just kind of goes to why thinking of time in terms of a lag between events, even before you measure it, and you measured it from a subjective level. You said it feels fast and it feels slow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so there's not to say that the subjective is not of importance, but to recognize this difference. Like the human experience is immensely subjective. Like it is uniquely defined experientially by you. Have your experience, I have mine. And it's primarily described in terms of like, you know, this felt fast, this felt slow, this felt good, this felt bad. And those aren't objective things. Yeah. And I'm not, and just to recognize the difference between the objective and the subjective experience, and that there are differences there, and they hold different, let's say, values. You know, it's not like a comparison. It's not to get completely objective, because that is, I'm going to measure the distance between 2 events with like a stopwatch. That would be objectively measuring it. But you can use the 2 things, like they're just complementary tools. Tools for what? Tools for being alive. And so we'll deal with how you would use that maybe again in a moment. But the second thing, which I would say that you brought up, which is subjective, is this notion of memory. Mm-hmm. Like not like everything as it relates to memory, like I'm going to remember something, maybe not exactly as it objectively happened, but like I'll remember it as I subjectively experienced it. And recognizing that memories sometimes can't be recalled, even though they have happened. But again, this goes to the point of recognizing that built into this human experience is that it's subjective and objective simultaneously. So to maybe add more to that concept is the objective nature of anything, like any part of the human experience, I almost metaphorically see as like a stake in the ground. Like this is what's happening. This is what we're dealing with. And then the subjective nature is like how you as an individual meet it. And once you begin to become more skilled in what it means to be the captain of your human being ship, you realize that your subjectivity can change. Like the very thing that you defined one way, you could subjectively change it, though the objective doesn't change. You begin to find more subjectivity. These are what I'm describing right now as a principle, meaning that it can be applied in multiple avenues of life. But the principle is the notion between the objective occurrence of life and the subjective experience. And that though the objective seemingly is solid, it's the subjective where we have the most amount of play.
Yeah.
So there's that. But then this is where it starts to get really tricky, is what you think is objective really isn't objective. And then like now it starts to, you see like how it becomes slippery. It becomes like, the whole thing of what we're working on, what you're building with is like, maybe that's more malleable as well. And so then the principle becomes like maybe less about your subjective definition, like this was good, this is bad, I enjoyed this I didn't enjoy, this was pleasurable, this was not pleasurable, like that can all change. But you're thinking the objective doesn't change. But then once you realize of the fluidity or the malleability within your subjective nature, you can begin to apply that on the objective nature. You can, or at least begin to question the objective nature. This is why, like what we were saying, but we were talking a little bit before about the NHS healthcare system. There would be a bunch of human beings that will objectively build their subjective experience around the idea that the NHS system is objectively the best thing for the human experience to be healthy. And then that seems to be a truth, like something you can build around. And how do you build around it? Well, I'm going to follow all of the NHS recommended ways of living life and their orders or their processes and procedures. And then you begin to like, that's where your life begins to go. And you live that way. And then you begin to then say, well, hold on, what I thought was objective was that the NHS was something which was really, really solid. And then you begin to realize what you thought that subjectivity or that objectivity wasn't as objective as you thought. It wasn't really grounded on anything real. So then this is like a simple example of explaining like how the objective becomes subjective. And then this is kind of like we're backing into, what it means to be alive, to be conscious and to be aware and having this human experience.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And then I'm going to say one more thing before I pause and allow you to reflect back. And then all of this like comes back to this idea, or where I want to bring it with our talk with astrology, is this notion of maybe what we could call objective lag, or like a constant lag between events. And then we begin to use those lags in the same way that I described to you of the bookends, the bookends of like, of our conversation. I had 55 days of life experience between these two calls. And I'm personally like, I'm creating like something objective. I'm like, the calls are objective. They really did happen. But then I'm applying a lot of like subjectivity to it. Like I'm saying it matters. That would be the subjectivity.
Yeah.
If we could do that, or when we do that to maybe something more universal, like that's when the movement in the heavens or the celestial realms becomes so significant, is because we're all kind of under that same sort of those movements. And when you begin to understand that, in both like a linear way, like you understand like what's actually the orbit speeds, and you can identify it in the sky, and you can actually see these sort of things. You begin to have a different relationship with time as it relates to experiencing life beneath the celestial realm, which I mean by that is like being alive in a human body with solid ground beneath the feet and sky above. Like you begin to play at a different level. And that to me is what I'd like to really go into as it relates to an approach to the celestial realm. Astrology is too limiting of a term. Astromonia, I think, is a more accurate term for what I'm going to be describing. But I want to set up for like, this is why it is a worthy endeavor to want to become familiar with this type of approach or thought.
It's exciting to learn this. One thing that came to my mind when you were talking as well was when someone has a traumatic experience. Let's say you were about to have a car accident. Time would slow down. Your body, whatever it's doing in that traumatic experience, would literally stop time for you to maybe react. You know, if a tiger was to jump out the bushes, you would probably have a moment where you could figure things out in a Superman kind of way, really, and make your move. So in a way, there's a magic, an ability somewhere within us, I feel.
Without a doubt. Hey, no one told me that I could do this sort of thing. And I want to, I think that's a great example. So two things I want to share. So one time I studied with this guy. He was like a keto. Do you know what a keto is? Mm-hmm. So he was like a very, very high-ranking ketoist. I think that's what you would call it. And okay. He, he showed and was recognized a proficiency within the skill set and of applying that art form. Yeah. What he told me once, he was like, let's say like the most basic move he was showing me, like in a keto, is my camera's kind of, there we go. It was freezing up. Is just this like this curve of your hand.
Okay.
And he said, to the beginner, there might be just like three parts in this move. Like the hand is flat, and then the fingers start to curve, and then maybe like you do a weight shift or something like that, and there are three moves. And he was saying to the master, there are 10,000 mini parts of that move. Right. And they've spent time, they've been conscious in each one of those subtle nuanced shifts. Wow. And so what the idea was, like, I'm going to articulate it as a concept, but the magic is like how it happens is like you're spending like just through awareness, your conscious awareness of doing the practice slowly and feeling those subtle changes, you are establishing, you're like putting a microscope on what would normally just be blended in together. Like you've slowed down time, you've taken down a movement which would normally take the body, I don't know, like a millisecond to do, but you've turned it into 10,000 like subparts. And when you're doing that with consciousness, like you go and you're like, okay, I'm becoming familiar with it. So you're like, okay, well, that sounds great. But the payoff or the reason why you do that is so that when one is in an actual life experience and the tiger jumps out at them, that there's already an experience, a proficiency, a knowledge base, and that training just kind of takes care of itself. Like that's the magic.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'd like to share like one specific story. So this was, I don't know, like 10 years ago. And I used to like a training practice for me, like a physical, spiritual, emotional, psychological training practice I used to do was I would ride my bike with no hands. And I'd be like,
Okay.
because something happens physiologically that when you are on a bicycle, when you're physically balanced and you're propelling yourself forward, and no hands like affects the balance in a certain way and so forth. Long and short, and I was immensely experienced of this. Like I was very, very good at it, and very, very skilled, and I practiced very, very regularly. Like it wasn't anything that was new for me. And one particular day, as I was on a path and I was riding no hands, and I went to go past these two kids, they sucker punched me, or they attempted to. They had skateboards. They turned around. They tried to like knock me off my bike. I don't remember any of that. What I remember is saying like passing on my left, and then probably, which was like a split second later, I was standing on the bike path, and just like really kind of confused, like what happened, like how did I get here? The long and short of it was somehow like as this happened, as the quote unquote assault occurred, like my right arm went up and I blocked the hit, and I jumped off the bike at the same time and I landed on my feet.
Wow.
I have no recollection of this. And like I only studied Aikido. Like Aikido is one of these things where they're like 20-year moves, which implies like there's some things which are so subtle and so nuanced, it'll take you 20 years before you really like get into it. Like, so I'd only like partially like studied Aikido for 3 years. By no means was I like a skilled practitioner, but I met it in a way which I think is at least uncommon nowadays, in terms of like, I realize that I'm really working on an energetic level of reality between all sorts of different things. And for me, that was a solidification of like, what the human being, what happens when you begin to do these sort of practices. These practices have real world, real experience. That's what I want to say, a real experiential outcome. And so time, our relationship with time, just as a concept, things begin to change in your experience when you begin to deconstruct all of these, like in the same way that so many people might put their faith into NHS and never question it. It's not exactly the same with time, but it's similar. They've never really learned what lag is, when lags occur, and then how to recognize the correspondence between like different lags in your of your life, and where they begin and when they end. And this is an immensely creative sort of experience. Like whatever you want to make, it's going to happen. And so I came up with a lag just based upon like our conversations, but there are more fundamental ones. There are ones that are whatever the level of reality where the sun, moon, stars, and planets exist. Like on that level of reality, there is real, objective, measurable lag times. And so becoming familiar with that is it's significant. It's significant for having better awareness and control of your individual life experience.
So how did you get into this? Because you said before that you wanted to learn how to experience your experience. You wanted to improve your experience, really. So you wanted to learn these concepts. So was this one of the art forms that you decided to tackle at that time?
Kind of yes. I mean, like when I don't know, how does anything move forward, right? Like we had that conversation. You're like, this piece of paper, the only thing that makes sense to me is that my future self left this for me. And like, as a reminder, I don't know how this world works. Like, I'm not like, and so it's on the level of like, for whatever it is that moves us through what this mysterious experience is. I don't know. But what I do know is it began for me as a an interest in just like normal astrology, like how a regular person would, or anyone off the street who showed an interest in astrology. Like I began with that. I was like, oh, wow, this is interesting. What, you can go and through the stars, you could like tell me secrets about stuff. I'm like, yeah, I want to go and learn this. And so that probably first took root in me as you know, a young man, like a teenager. And I kind of carried that light, sometimes more lightly, sometimes more heavily, meaning I was more committed to study during, like, let's say a 10, 20-year period of time. And then I had an opportunity where I had really close access to someone who was much, much more knowledgeable about the workings of astrology than I was. And I had all sorts of questions for her, like really, really specific questions. And like, well, what about this? And what about that? And I wasn't able to articulate what I was trying to ask. I was thinking of very, very specific things that would be happening in the heavens or in the astrology chart. And I wasn't able to articulate that specific well enough. So it occurred to me that, well, let me build a star, what I call the starboard now, like an astrology model. And I could go and build up one configuration because I can articulate what I'm trying to explain with this configuration, because words weren't enough. And that was the impetus. Like, you know, let me create this thing which would help me ask better questions, because what I'm asking now is not landing.
That's really
that
good.
happened. So that was my initial kind of like push. And then as soon as I built that starboard, I just started, you know, something happened within me, and I was competent and confident enough to really be able to look at someone's natal chart and be able to tell a narrative that landed for someone, that they received some level of value in hearing me like wax poetically upon looking at their chart, like just like any normal person who would go and who could do chart interpretation. But then, and I was good at it, and it was fun, and like, you know, and all of the trappings, you know, you mentioned this in our earlier conversation with like the the NHS and the you know, the thing that happened in 2020, that there was a feedback loop where like everyone, if you were in the NHS system, you are now a hero. And so the feedback loop was like, what was happening is we're rewarding you. The system is rewarding you for doing what we made you do. We turn you into doctors and nurses, but at the same time, don't question anything. Because if you start questioning it, we've already said you're amazing, you're a hero. And if you question it, well, then all of that might go away. And the person's getting all this positive feedback, like, oh, it feels good. I am a hero. Yeah, look at me in the mirror. I'm a fucking hero. And, you know, you like, it feels good when people like give you that. So that's true for anything which you've like learned and you become proficient. And then like, do I really want to go and start to deconstruct the thing that's feeding me? And I started doing that. I was doing all this astrology, and I realized, I'm like, there's some basic things I just don't understand. Like, as it relates to, is like, why does the moon rise like sometimes in the afternoon, or sometimes I could see the moon in the sky in the middle of the day, and other days I can't. And like just basic stuff like that. And one of the big jumps, like if someone is into astrology, typically there's a predictable learning curve. Is they're going to start to like learn the language of astrology, and they're going to be applying it to themselves for the most part. And you're going to see yourself in it, and it's going to make sense. And you're like, oh, this is. I hear this a lot when I hear people use this type of syntax. I am followed by an astrological sign. I am a Sagittarius. I am a Scorpio. And it's like, that's an indication of someone's beginning to identify. They are
Yeah.
identifying their individual experience through the archetype of astrology. And that's normal.
Yeah.
And like, you're like, oh, this is great. And I identify with this and this is who I am. And then at some point that person is going to realize that there are a couple different ways which people practice astrology. And in the system that they learned their chart on, there's another system which is just as well beloved by the other half of the astrology world, which actually says like, no, you're a different sun sign, like your signs change. And then the person is left, the individual is left they're at a crossroads. What am I going to do now? Like I was given new information, which really challenges everything which I thought I knew. And so what I could do is like the doctors who are called heroes, who maybe are like realizing, hey, something ain't right here, but I'm going to pretend not to see it because I'm not willing to like this thing which is serving me. And I get it. Like it feels good. Like I'm going to pretend that's not there. Or which what often happens is basically what dark matter is in quantum theory. It's like, let me create like let me work around a whole sort of model so it all makes sense. And so you'd be like, well, this system makes sense here. And then this system makes sense here. So you're coming up with all these convoluted rules to make your story hold water.
Yeah.
And so I was not going to do that. I was like, uh-oh. Like I know this system really well, this like astrology system, but I just found a glaring contradiction. And I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I knew that I wasn't going to go and just accept it. Because also, like, I'm not like an astrologer. I've never identified, like put like a lot of self-value in saying like I'm an astrologer. So it was easier for me to kind of deconstruct that. And if anything, I would say I would within myself, I quote unquote identify more with is that as being a conspiracy theorist. Like I'm going to question everything which comes from an authority.
Yeah.
And guess what? That includes astrology.
Yeah.
And so as soon as I start seeing this contradiction and all this sort of stuff, I just start like poking holes in as many places as I can with the astrological model. But I'm not just tearing down astrology because I also know that there's a truth to it.
Sure.
And I recognize that it's not as simple as throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I've seen like a lot of things which are objectively accurate. I've seen things which are subjectively accurate. I've seen how people respond to it, which means that it is filling a gap which is within an individual. So I met astrology with a conspiratorial sort of perspective of like, let me get through all the bullshit and then see what remains and what I'm calling bullshit is contradictions. Like all of the things, and a contradiction would be like, if I was born on December 2nd, and if one astrology, the tropical system says that my sun sign is a Sagittarius, and then the other system, the sidereal system, would say that my sun sign is in Scorpio, like that's a contradiction. It can't be both. Like I can understand how I can make that work, but it is not objectively, it can't be both of those things. So eliminating all of the places where there's contradiction. And where that brought me. So that coupled with this general question of, I don't really know some of the fundamental basics of being a sky watcher. Like, I don't know why I don't really understand why the moon is visible during the day. I don't really understand. I don't really understand, like, why is there an eclipse? Like, what's an eclipse? And like, how do they know? How do they know when the eclipses are going to happen? Like questions like that. And that was what was my own internal inspiration, which drove me or pushed me through like a way of deconstructing. And I said this earlier, I was like, astrology is not the right word. It's not, it was deconstructing astrology to discover the word I'm going to use right now is called astromonia, which is the reunion of what we would call right now astrology and astronomy.
Okay.
The astronomy is the objective. Remember, I talked about like that objective piece and that subjective piece, and they go hand in hand. And so most people who practice astrology right now, like people who are they can interpret charts, they know all this stuff, but they lack an objective understanding. And I was there as well. I lacked an objective understanding of what I am just interpreting on a subjective level. And the return of understanding the objective level completely grounds that subjective interpretation. I say this, I kind of laugh a lot. Like I follow a decent amount of like people who are like into the celestial realm, and this is more than just astrology. But you'll hear like every full moon is like, this is a great time for manifestation. This is a great time.
Yeah.
Like every freaking month is a great time. Like you say this all the time. Like there's no real like texture. There's something that was missing there. So
yeah.
Back to the astromonia. The astromonia is this like, one is a real knowledge of the sky, like being able to really understand, like from an astronomer's perspective, not necessarily like, in those big telescopes, but just a comfort with knowing things like the ecliptic and like the where you are in orientation, standing on Earth with looking at the sky, and then understanding like things that are really objective, like, timings and orbits and stuff like that, coupled with then, and I'll do it a little bit more general, is the fact that the celestial realm could provide, you can lean into the mystery of life through the celestial realm. So I don't want to quite say interpretation, like but I recognize like there's something there though. There's something that in the astronomy world where they've killed that. Like there is no wonder, there is no mystery, it's like, this is something that can be solved. And then that middle path between the two. And so that was like, if you will, the boundaries, which brought me down a particular path. And then where I find myself in this moment in terms of why this is, what it is, how to practice it, and why it's significant, is in many ways it's so basic. Like I feel I've taught these courses quite a few times, and I'm still trying to figure out like who's the best audience. Because there's on a certain level, it's so it's very, very advanced astrology, like in a way. Like for me to be able to articulate like how to really look at the sky, it is objectively more, it's better for an individual to use an astrology chart to become familiar with the sky they see than anything you see astronomical. Like an astrology chart is more objective, but none of the people who look at astrology would ever think about looking at it objectively. Just in the same way, if you were to show an astrology chart to your typical like astronomer, they'll probably just roll their eyes at it. They'll be like, what is this woo-woo nonsense? But the truth is, like, they really they meet beautifully, and it meets within like timing, and it's just, and all it is, like, if in the most general sense, in the truest sense, our relationship as individuals, in a human body on this thing called Earth, and our relationship with the celestial realm, and keep this in mind, this is built into our experience, we all have an equal relationship to the celestial realm. We all have equal access to the sun, the moon, the stars, and the planets. Like, none of us get to own it. Like,
No.
it doesn't matter where you are on Earth, you get to see it. It's not like, this one mountain where unless you're here, you get to see it. But if you're not here, you don't get to climb K2 or Mount Everest. Like, you got to be there. But in the heavens, we all have access to it equally. And so that's built into this experience. So it seems to point to the fact that there's significance for us all to know it. And what that primary relationship is, that first relationship is that we get from knowing the celestial realm, is we get our bearings. Like if you're out in sea, like the stars, and you don't have any other point of references, the stars will just tell you what direction you're going. That's what I mean by bearings. Like, if you know where the sun is rising, you'll know where the east is. You'll know where north. You can figure out where north, south, east, west is. Like, on the most fundamental level, the celestial realm meets the human being is like, I'm going to give you your bearings. So let's drill that down a little bit more, like metaphysically or metaphorically. What it means is, like, this is a mystery. You don't know where you are. You don't know how you got here. And I know that. I know it's a mystery, but I'm going to give you some tools along the way. And what is the tool? Is I'm going to tell you where you are physically within this mystery so you can get your bearings, so you can make your next step. So the heavens can do that for us in multiple ways. And the next way after, like, let's say your physical bearings, to know where what we're calling east is or west is, and north and south, so that if you are like, not to say that you need to do this, but I'm using this as an example. If you are walking across a great land mass, or you're lost in the woods or what have you, like, you can utilize the sky to know where you are on the most basic level. So that's the first level. The second level is you can know where you are in terms of timing. And all this is it's giving you your bearings for that lag of experience. And so the next level would be like, well, what does the timing mean? That's where everyone wants to jump in with astrology. They're like, tell me what this means. Tell me what this means. And like, no. Like, it's like, it's giving your children all of their presents before Christmas. It's like, you have to wait. You can't go straight to like this dopamine hit. And that's what one of the quote, I'm going to use the word traps. In our paradigm, what keeps it held in place is this unification of how people are interpreting lag and time, and not understanding they're holding a false time and place, and then at the same time not recognizing that there is an objective time that they could at least be aware of. I'm not saying follow it. I mean, you could do whatever you want, but if you're not aware of it, if you're not aware of what you assume to be an objective truth is not an objective truth, well, then like you're kind of lost. That was the NHS story. So I'm going to give you one example, and then I'm going to pause and allow you to kind of like decompress with this. And it's this: at least in America, the first thing they do when they take the little 5-year-old and the 6-year-old and they put them in the indoctrination camps of early childhood development is they teach them the days of the week.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? First thing, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So those don't exist anywhere. Like, there's no objective truth to Monday. There's no objective truth to Tuesday. There is an objective truth to sunrise and sunset and full moons and solstices. Like, those are objective in a way, but it doesn't begin that way. It begins with like this 7 days, this false cycle. Like, I understand kind of like where some of these cycles come from or what they're anchored to, but it is not an objective truth. That's the first thing. And then the second thing, and this is the like, if you really sit with this for a moment and you're just like realize what this implies, it explains, or at least it gives you a clue as to like how all of this is managed to begin with. Like, let's assume there really are 6 billion people on Earth. And let's say of those 6 billion, 5 billion of them right now, like in this present moment, as you and I are holding this conversation, they're in agreement that this present moment is defined as Sunday. Like, Sunday doesn't exist. You've got, you could take like 20 people in a room and you could throw out a question like, what's the best movie of all time? And you got 100, all those people are going to argue or what have you. Like, no one's going to be on the same page. Yet you've gotten 90% of the consciousness holding on a false belief in total agreement that the present moment is defined by something that ain't real. That's where it begins. Once you see that's happening, I'm like, well, let me at least get on solid ground. Let me create some space. Like, I can still follow Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I know it's Sunday, but I'm not unconsciously accepting like, well, this is, NHS. They've got my best interest in heart. They've got white coats. They've gone to the right schools. They know exactly what they're doing. Like this level of deconstruction. And it's to like come to something solid. So then like you can begin to maneuver and navigate with like, it begins to render around you. So let me pause now and like allow you to get some questions.
Well, I mean, the first ending on that bit in terms of the indoctrination, obviously the curious explorer, adventurer, and conspiracy theorist in me starts to wonder of where and why they would bring the concept up of the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the working week, and everything else would bring in a confinement, would it not, in terms of an individual?
Well, without a doubt, and even more so, it's a structure. So
exactly.
I would say what's more like from the perspective of controlling the masses, if you will. First and foremost is you need to have, it's like herding cats. You don't want to be herding cats. So you need to have some sort of structure so it becomes a little bit more manageable. This is why you have government. This is why government is mind control. It's not so much like there's certain things we need to get everyone on the same page with. And then there's certain things where they're allowed to have like freedom within. And so getting everyone, the perception of time is so paramount to the human experience. Particularly, this is what you said in the beginning, the subjective nature of this can feel fast and this could feel slow. Like time is very, very subjective, and different cultures and different people have like different ways, like this is a study, like a study in mainstream sociology is the recognition of how different cultures have different relationships with time. And because of the fundamental relationship of time, like, the Germans and the Japanese being an example of those who've got the strictest relationship with time. And then you've got like more like other cultures, which are less strict in all ways, have a softer relationship with time. You can see this bleed through. Yeah. And so that just points to the idea of the influence of time. So now it doesn't even really matter that like, I just want to get the most amount of people on the same page, because all I got to do is turn this one page. And then I'm turning all of the people who are on that page, and I want to make it as basic as possible. So like the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and that creates like these confines. And then it gets even more interesting, like you're saying, like, the introduction of the work week and the weekend. And then how that, again, like it begins to frame up in people's minds. They're 40 years old, they're 50 years old. They don't even think that they're doing anything. They're like, oh, it's the weekend, and the weekend means this. The weekend, now I get to relax, or now I get to go and have fun. I get to blow off steam. I get to get drunk on Friday night. I get to get in a fight. I get to fuck. I get to do whatever. And now what they've done is they've taken their creative energy and they put it in this confine. Doesn't matter what they do so much, is like, now you're all on the same page. And it's very, very cleverly anchored into like real things like the moon and the sun and Saturn and all these other things, which are objectively real. I don't, like, today's Sunday, I don't think there is anything that fundamentally makes this moment in time has some sort of resonance with the concept of what we call the sun, other than the fact that 16 billion people right now are in agreement that now is the time of the sun. That creates the mechanism for the sun to really be influential in this moment. This is where it gets tricky. This is where it gets tricky with astrology as well, because you begin to see that what the nature of this realm is, it is self-replicating. What you on a certain level, what you hold to be true, you will experience to be true. Like, it builds off of itself. It doesn't matter if it's bullshit or not. And so it makes this idea of like finding an objective bottom. Like, I think that's an impossibility. Like, I don't think like there's an objective bottom to what we're trying to find, but we can get to discover a more solid ground than the one which we've been conditioned to stand upon. And
sorry, Mike. There's a couple of objective ways of looking at time, though, in terms of the sunrise, isn't there? The dawn of the day, if you like, and that would provide a new day, and our changes physically through our experience would suggest, you know, we get older, don't we, and we decay over that time period. So
now, like, so we just entered, like, what? How long have we been recording? Like, maybe an hour.
An hour.
So we spent like 1 hour, or at least I've been trying to do this. Is like, I'm kind of like bringing our minds, this conversation, down a certain level, so that we can then have a deeper conversation. And that deeper conversation, like the threshold into it, is what you just mentioned. And so this is part of the deconstruction process. I said this in the beginning of like the making certain that the foundation, when we're talking about concepts, that the foundation doesn't have any sort of assumptions, because we want to go exactly where you're going, but we want to make certain that we understand how we got there. And then once we get into that part of the conversation, like it becomes, if it is not built upon a solid understanding of what we're deconstructing, this is really, really like this level of conscious awareness is it's like tightrope walking. When you're the idea, they've talked about consciousness this way many times, or it's been said many times, like you're trying to describe the thing with the very thing you're describing. I don't think I did a good job with that. How about this? It's like a pencil trying to write on itself. Like, it's paradoxical. Like, this experience is paradoxical. There's no, like, that's the subjective and objective relationship. Like, the very thing that you think is objective eventually is going to turn subjective. And recognizing that's a truth to the experience. That's the tightrope walk, because you begin to build on the objective. Okay, finally, I found the objective. And now let me build upon it. And now it's like, oh, I'm going to deconstruct your objective. And you are partially going to want to go and defend that objectiveness, because you're like, I don't want to fall again. But when you realize perhaps that this is the tightrope, and and it takes time. It takes time and consciousness and with yourself to kind of like deconstruct the ideas that we didn't even realize were constructed ideas to begin with. What do you mean there's no such thing as Monday? What do you mean there's like this is making me feel uncomfortable. I don't like how, like, that's legitimate as well. And so now going back to all of this is the beauty of what I call the practice of natural astrology or astromonia, is it begins to give you something very, very kind of like a holding spot, a practice. That's what it really is a practice for this walk of this paradox of being human beings here, of like whatever this is a paradoxical realm. Like it's always shifting, and like as soon as you think you got it figured out, you realize that's not it at all. And the only way you're solid is when you accept that you can't ever figure it out, and you're like, oh, now I figured it out. Like that's the paradoxical nature. And how do you take that concept and then be skillful with that? And that's what the celestial realm can provide. But you have to be able to deconstruct it. You can't just like accept Mike's word for it. You need to understand how we got here so that you're like, okay, I know, I get it. And now, and I understand it conceptually, so I can also work with it, not necessarily mentally, conceptually, but from another space of the human, which is like, more of like what we've talked about before, like heart-based, or more like what I would say is a better term to describe it is magnetically. You move from being electric to magnetic.
Mm-hmm. And the reason I brought those points up was I was trying to put myself in a situation where I had never been taught Monday to Friday or whatever, the days of the week. So how would I measure time that's how I would do it. I would be looking at, okay, well, the sun's risen and now it's gone dark and now the sun's risen again. So there's my day. I wouldn't know what an hour is. I'm just trying to put myself in a position of not knowing any of that concept.
And notice how tricky it is to articulate what you're saying, because you use the word day. Are you talking about a 24-hour period? Are you talking about the period where the sun's out and it's daylight? Like it gets really, really tricky.
Yeah, exactly. It does, because I wouldn't measure hours. I'm putting myself in a position where I don't know what hours are. I don't know what days are. I don't know any of that. All I know is the sun rises, it goes dark, and then the sun rises. But that time could be completely different each time, couldn't it? Each day, it could be completely different.
Well, it definitely is. I would say like that potentiality, the life experience could be anything, let's say, but we have these sort of, it begins with objective markers: sunrise, sunset, sun at the highest point of the sky. Like when you begin to have the language, and it's there to begin to articulate moments in the environment. What do I mean by that? Like sunrise, that's a moment in the environment. When it gets dark out, that's a moment in environment. And then you have your life overlapping that. Right now in the paradigm, there's no payoff to think this way. There's no reason like to have this level of awareness at like what I mean by payoff is like there's a real payoff to like learn how to use technology. There's a real payoff for this other sort of stuff, but it doesn't reward the individual in the paradigm to think this way. And so it's easy to ignore it. Like all I need to know is like, what's the calendar date? When's my appointment? When is my this? When's my that? But it's completely disgrounded or not connected to anything that's more objective. Like this is like the NHS. This I keep going back to the NHS narrative or metaphor, and it's like I just trust that like it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I don't have to worry really about anything else because I'm going to worry about the events I'm going to do in my life on this like system of measuring time.
Yeah,
and it's not to not use that. It's to recognize that there's more than that. And then when that space, I mean, I do this very, very consciously in my practice, is like I'm always going back to this, where it's going back to the objective markers in time and understanding it, not because like, oh, I want to go and live like they did 10,000 years ago. Why I'm doing it is I want to create space so that I certainly know the days of the week in the calendar. I want to create space between knowing that and also knowing the the cycles in the more objective time, so that something else can happen, so that a different type of life experience can occur. And so it's like it's creating a structure. I'm creating a structure for life to form, but now I'm creating a structure not limited to the paradigm structure. I'm creating it outside of that. And so it's in that space where something new can happen. And if I'm the one, or if you're the one who's doing this, well, then what occurs outside of the paradigm, so what that would be is like the paradigm says is you go work 5 days a week and you go to the pub on the weekend, and then you go and you take your like 30-day holiday and whatever. Like, that's what you're supposed to do. And that's what we told you, like your life is supposed to be. And then when you begin to create like a space for something new to happen, it has to happen outside of the paradigm because it doesn't fit the paradigm, but it's objectively true. And like, this is literally like how the realm works. Like you have to create the space. Like this is no different than like the subconscious language, which you have to yourself, is going to still be projected into your reality. You're going to create that reality, even though you don't realize that you hold all of these subconscious beliefs. Like this is a little bit more of a clean way of recognizing these hidden beliefs. And what I mean by clean is it's subjective. Like the moon has an orbit, and it's always changing. Like the moon's orbit is not just like full moon to full moon or new moon to new moon. It's also that cycle happening to the backdrop of the stars. And so now there's like two cycles that you can objectively know.
Wow.
And so and let me explain why. There's a real reason. It's not. So first, like, let me make this a little bit more tangible, because it can be it's so confusing for people who've studied the stars, but it really doesn't have to be. It's just like convoluted. So I want you to think about water for a moment. And water is just like a substance, let's say. Like we know what water is, and we look at it and we call it water, and maybe we know it's H2O or what have you. And we also know that under a very, very certain circumstance, when the environment gets to a certain level, that this liquid, what we'll call liquid, again, like the shape of water, it changes and it becomes solid. It freezes. We also know that water and these are predictable. These are objective things. Like when this thing happens in the atmosphere, the water will always change, like assuming all things being equal, just as the same thing like water can boil, right?
Yeah.
So there are two systems. So in Celsius, we'll say like it objectively freezes. Water objectively freezes. That is 100%. Like there's no misunderstanding unless you're doing like, some trickery. And I can call that 0 degrees, or I could call that 32 degrees in Fahrenheit. Like 30 Fahrenheit and Celsius are not like, they're not at odds with one another. They're different systems of measuring the same phenomenon. The phenomenon is that at certain conditions, this water would freeze, just like 100 degrees and 212 degrees measure the opposite. The same is true with being able to measure the sun or any of the other planets relative to space. And we've got different systems. And one system is like Celsius and one system is like Fahrenheit. And most people get lost in this, like, do I want to use Celsius or do I want to use Fahrenheit? And misses, like, the real thing is, I'm interested in what these systems, like the fundamental truth. And what that fundamental truth is in astrology is it's a location. It's like a location. What I mean by that is, like, let's say you can see the moon in the sky, and let's say you recognize the star that it's closest to, and you know the name of that star. Like, your location is that moon relative to that star. Like, now it's 2 inches away, and then that's like 3 inches away. Like, that's what I mean by a location. And now you're dealing with, like, on this fundamental level of time and space, lag and location.
Right.
So now those are fundamental building blocks of the human experience of lag. There was yesterday, and there's going to be tomorrow, and there's the present moment. Like, that is fundamentally true no matter what. And then there is like location, which is like, well, I'm standing here, and yesterday I was standing there, and tomorrow I'm walking somewhere else. Like that is fundamental to being human. Before we get into, like, well, why am I moving? Or, like, I like it here and I don't like it there, or this happened fast. Like, before you get into any of that, like, that is built into our experience. So when you begin to actually see it, know it in the sky before it's personal, but you recognize that it's happening, like you're moving around and there's lag, you're working at that level of reality. You're existing at that level of reality, and you're on a more solid ground. I still have no idea what the human experience is. I don't know what space is. I don't know about any of this stuff. That's where it begins to fall apart. Like, that's where the objectiveness will fall apart. But I'm standing on the objectivity of, like, I can begin to measure and know this. The very act of doing that begins to change the game. And what I would say, one of the ways it does is it moves the individual from an electric experience to a magnetic experience.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, well, we like you were saying as well, is we render our reality as well. So our perceptions of the time and stars and everything else would alter your personal reality then as well, wouldn't it? In terms
Maybe.
of what you're rendering.
Well, definitely. Yes, like, all of that subjectivity, like, without a doubt. But even before, like, I mean, this is what the tendency is, where you're going right now. Like, there's what you're describing is, where's the meat? Where's the meat? Where's the good stuff? Like, where's the stuff which is really interesting? Where's the stuff I really want to lean into? And I'm gonna encourage you. I'm like, we're not gonna eat the meat yet. I know you want to. I know.
No, I'm not ready for the meat, Michael.
But, what that is in this metaphor is, you need to learn the basics. And so this is what the basics are. Is we call it a birth chart. Okay, you've seen one before, right? Looks like a circle.
Yeah.
So, do you know what how would you best describe, like, not what it means, but what it is? What's the birth chart?
So I've seen the wheel with your astrological signs, your Capricorn, Aquarius, and all that, and they're all laid out in a circle. I've seen all that. There's a zodiac, if you like. I've seen that, the celestial chart. But what does it mean to me? Very little.
Not what it means. What is it? You have the capability. Like, I know right now, because I know the answer to the question. Like, it's a bit of a setup, but I know that you know exactly what it is, or even more so, when I explain to you or reveal to you. I'm not going to explain it to you. I'm going to reveal what's always in front of you. What it actually is probably going to be surprising to you.
Probably not as it. Okay, you're probably not going to go as in depth as my thoughts are in terms of the code that we are born into.
Exactly. We're not going that depth. That's the meat. We're not going to the meat.
That's the meat. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
What do you know? What time of day you were born?
I do. 10 a.m.
10 a.m. Okay. So 10 a.m. Where is the sun relative to like Earth in the sky? Like you standing on Earth at 10 a.m.
Well, that's it. I have no idea.
So this is what you actually do. So, and this is why our language is so confusing, because I'm asking you the most basic questions, but you're receiving it like, oh, I think he's asking me like a tough question. I don't have any idea. So this is what. So think about where the sun is at sunrise. Like the sun is literally like a yellow ball, and at the most literal sunrise, you'll see half of that ball would be visible in the sky, and the other half would be beneath the land, what we would call beneath the horizon. But that's an objective thing. Like a 5-year-old would be like, Daddy, 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 why is there a half circle right there? And it hurts my eyes to look at it. Like that level of reality. So let's say sunrise, they link it to the time 7 a.m., right?
Yeah. Okay.
10 a.m. Guess what? From your perspective, standing at Earth, watching the sun, it's probably a little bit higher. I'm using the words higher because we don't really have the language to describe it. It's like 1 inch or 2 inches above that line, which we call the horizon. And 3 hours earlier at sunrise, it was right on there. So it's like the sun is right there. I can point to it. And because you're like, this isn't a new concept, the sun and the movement of the sun in the sky, you'll then you'll be like, and actually, Mike, in 2 more hours, like when it's noon, the sun's not going to be there. It's going to be a little bit higher in the sky. Like it does this. And then like at 3 o'clock, it's actually going down in the sky. But whereas before, from where I'm looking, like now I know my directions. I know east, west, south. And I know that the sun, I'm facing south. And that means the east is where the sun rises, and that's on my left. And at 10 o'clock, 10 in the morning, I know it's still kind of eastish, and it's like right there in the sky. And then eventually it gets higher up in the sky, and then it goes to the right, it goes to the west, and then it disappears. Like I'm talking that level of just like simplicity and objectivity. Yeah. Right? So I'm going back to my question. If I were to go and draw a diagram, like let's say me and you are having a conversation, and I got a piece of paper, and I draw a line across it, and I'm like, this line is what we're calling the horizon. So the horizon is where this thing we call Earth meets the sky. This is that line. And the horizon is always best seen when you're looking out at the ocean, where you could see like a flat thing. So you're looking at a horizon. And I say, this is a drawing of the horizon. And I show you like, this is the east. And I put on the left side of the paper, E, and right above that horizon line. And on the right line, or the right side of that line, I put a W for west, and I do a half circle. Yeah. And I draw to you, and I draw that half circle, and I tell to you, I'm like, this half circle is like the path which the sun is going to take. If you were stood looking at the sky all day long in the same position, and you like marked at every moment, you drew where the sun was on this line, where would you draw that? Where is the sun at 10 a.m.? Like you should be able to like. Yeah, it's on the east and slightly above the horizon. Right. And theoretically, like a 7-year-old, a 10-year, like you just need a 7-year-old's understanding of the physical world. Like they set up like what I'm describing, they'll be able to show where the sun is. Yeah. That's what your astrology chart is. Your astrology chart is this. So if you were born at 10 a.m., I'm going to tell you right now, that means every astrology chart is a circle. And the center line, the horizontal line that goes from the 9 o'clock position, 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock position. So it's the line that divides the circle. Every single one of the circles, that represents the horizon. That's literally the horizon. That's what that is. This is the horizon. And then you tell me the time of day of any astrological chart, and I will show where the sun is in your chart. Okay. So I know right now, like if you were born at 10 a.m., the the sun in your chart, like when you said before, it's like, oh, it's got a zodiac and it's got like the symbols of the planets. Well, I'll tell you right now where the sun goes. And the sun is probably like in that, I guess around the 11th. This is where it gets so fucking confusing, because now I'm going to use another analogy. The 11 o'clock position on a clock.
Okay.
That's where the sun would be on your natal chart, because that's where the sun would be around 10 a.m., right? Like it's still rising up. It's above the horizon. It's before noon. I just know that because it's that much common sense.
Yeah.
So, this is what the astrological chart is, like beginning to recognize first and foremost, it is a literal, like it maps out where everything is at a specific moment in time. Like it's legitimate. Like you could go, if you are facing south, it's all about the correct orientation. Oh, this is where everything is. And every single one of those placements has an address. So what's your birthday?
New Year's Eve, 1974.
1974. So January 1.
December 31st.
So there's a correspondence. They have correspondences between the Gregorian calendar and the zodiac. And the different zodiacs use different correspondences. But like once, like no one, what I'm explaining to you right now would be on a certain level, very, very like advanced astrology, but it's also very, very basic. And what I'm saying, like most astrologers have no idea that this is what their system is based upon. And what the system is based upon is the Gregorian calendar, and the degrees and the signs of the zodiac. And so I know the systems, I know how it works. Basically, like around the 21st of every month is when the signs change. And I know what the tropical zodiac is. So if you were born on the 1st, it's probably 10 days after the signs change. And
it's the 31st anyway, but yeah.
The 31st.
30th
so
of
like
December,
more or less. So this is where it gets interesting. There's 360 degrees in a circle, and there's 365 days in a solar cycle, right?
Yeah.
The sun basically moves 1 degree a day. Right? It moves 1 degree. The same people that gave you circle geometry gave you the calendar, and they gave you the zodiac. It all came from the Babylonian priest class.
Interesting.
Because it's all the fucking same, but they don't tell you nowadays that you're dealing with the same thing. So I know right now, just from how the system works. And so really, really like the system works, like it's effective. In tropical zodiac, your sun sign is basically 10 degrees Capricorn. If you were to go and look, it's 10 degrees Capricorn. So now I'm starting to go, and in my mind, and this isn't trick, this isn't like smart intelligence. I'm not like a genius. I just know the system that they've never told anyone that this is what the system is. It's this friggin' literal. Because all you want to do is you want the meat, and you're like, well, what does it mean? I'm like, I'm not going to tell you what it means until you understand what it is.
Yeah.
And it's telling you where is the sun relative to both the earth and the sky the moment you were born. It's giving you bearings. And I want to smack people up beside their head, like in a loving way, but it's like, let's get your bearings first. And what your bearings is. And so now what you have, so this is where it starts getting interesting, is within your, what they call a natal chart or your birth chart, is there are theoretically, let's say, 10 different positions, which don't change. This is where the moon was. This is where I could look at your chart and I'll know where the moon is relative to the sun, and I'll know the phase of the moon. Like it's that objective, because everything, like once it's demystified, you're like, oh, it's still a mystery as to how it got here and who set it up. But what it is not a mystery about is like, this is how I can follow it. And people don't understand how they can follow it because they just know Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And that ain't real. The real thing, this is what I mean, like we're grounding consciousness. You're learning this not because I'm trying to get like a payoff. I'm learning this because I'm getting my bearings in time, time space. Because once you understand that, well, now I'm like outside of that system. Now I'm outside of that system, a space has happened. So, okay. So on your chart, there are other things. There's the other heavenly bodies. So that's Mercury and the moon and all those things. And each one of those has an address. An address is a degree and a sign. And if you were to go and plot those based upon the system they told you, they're like, this is my system. This is the zodiac, and this is the order it goes. And every single one of these signs is 0 to 29 degrees. So when you give me a degree and a sign, you know exactly where that is. And our starting point, in your case, we're going to say 10 degrees Capricorn, that's a place. Now we can see where everything is relative to that. Like, is it the opposite side of the circle? Is it really close to it? Now we're beginning to like see where everything is relative to each other. And because I know the time of day, I know where it is relative to the plane of Earth. The plane of Earth just means like where the sun rises and where the sun sets, the horizon, the hour. That is our point of reference. So now I can tell you without looking at your chart, I know where your sun is. Your sun is in tropical at around 10 degrees Capricorn. 10 degrees Capricorn is going to be up there. And now I can go and imagine what part of the zodiac is right on the horizon. Like I can just do like simple calculations. Like what are two signs before Capricorn or after Capricorn? It's actually after Capricorn. The point I'm trying to make is like it becomes very, very logical, and you can begin to see and understand your birth chart as a literal map. And what I mean by a map is it has objective placements. It has degrees and signs which correspond to the Earth's relationship to the heavens on the eastern horizon, on the western horizon, for the sun, the moon, and all of the other things. And this is where it gets really interesting. All of those placements are then your point of reference. That doesn't change. So you carry that birth chart with you. What this is your point of reference. And what I mean by that is, in America, I don't know what they have in Britain, but in America, we're given a social security number when you're born, theoretically, 7-digit number. And that social security number is your point of reference into entering the system. Anytime you go into the system, you as a individualized expression of the totality of life is simplified into a 7-digit code. And then that 7-digit code is like how like everything is based upon, like, you know, your passport, and then like your credit cards and your bank accounts and like your school records. Like that's your point of reference. In a way, the numbers don't even matter. Or before we even want to look at the numbers from a mystical level, what just matters is like corresponds to you. Your birth chart is your point of reference for the constant movement of everything else. And once you begin to see your birth chart as it's giving you an address, like for you, I've told you one of your addresses right now, 10 degrees Capricorn. So now you know that's a point of reference. So what happens when you realize that the full moon is happening at 10 degrees Capricorn? Like suppose you're like looking at like an astronomy chart and like, oh yeah, the full moon is going to be tomorrow and its placement is 10 degrees Capricorn. And they're just using that to, like, the astronomers are giving you the placement of where in the sky the moon is. If there's a full moon at 10 degrees Capricorn, that means that the sun is opposite that. This is such like a tangible system. What do you mean it's the opposite that? So I know that the sun is at 10 degrees Cancer. That's the zodiac tells me that the opposite of that is. And follow me for a moment. 10 degrees Cancer, when the sun's at 10 degrees Cancer, that corresponds to a calendar date. The sun is only at 10 degrees Cancer on the first of June. Is that right? Cancer season begins on the 21st. So anyway, so what happens is you can begin to see how like our Gregorian calendar and places of where like the moon and the full moon and all of these systems are, like where they are in space, and you can correlate that back to your chart. So why does that matter? So now what happens is you have a real system, like an objective system. Your objective system begins with your chart, and your chart is filled with all of these places. 10 degrees Capricorn for where your sun is. 9 degrees Pisces for that's your rising sign. You've got all of these things, and now they can correspond to the unfoldment of life. Meaning like, oh, this is where a full moon is there. Your question would probably be like, well, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. Well, before I answer that, before you disempower yourself and you think like an expert like Mike Wann is going to tell you what it means, what I'm going to tell you is you objectively know that something unique is happening in your life. Because your sun is and I'm just using these things arbitrarily, but because we know that your sun is 10 degrees or is 10 degrees Capricorn, and now there's a full moon at 10 degrees Capricorn, that's unique for you. It's unique for anyone who's got like a 10 degrees Capricorn as a key placement. So what I would say is like, well, what the hell's going on in your life?
Yeah.
What's showing up? What does that require? That requires self-analysis. That requires self-awareness. That requires like being still. That requires, so now, like what's objectively happening is you are being given by the nature of this experience. Like you got a bookend event. I call that bookends for our conversation. This is one defined by your natal, this is one defined by the celestial realm, and it's unique to you and you understand it. And now that you see that things are occurring, and we're just using the moon, there are other ways of doing this.
Yeah.
You now have like moments in time to pause, moments in time that are only unique to you. No one else gives a fuck. The only people who care are you and life. And I'll say life is God, like, you know, that other consciousness that knows that you are looking at the timing of your life. You're looking at the timing of your life as it relates to like the mystery of the unfoldment of life. And you're just like, you're sitting there in stillness and whatever you want to do and like say, well, this is what my next move is, or wow, this is a really heavy time. And like, let me just pause and recognize that this is a heavy time. And I know this too will pass. Whatever it is, like you now have your own special relationship. It's objective. You know why it's happening. You're not like offloading it. Like if you were to ask me like, well, what does that mean? Well, depending upon the astrological system I may or may not be using, I'm going to give you a different interpretation. And depending upon how much you want to hear that or how much you like the way I deliver it, you're going to receive that to a various degree of receptivity or rejection. Like that's just the nature of how we are as humans.
Yeah.
But if you did that yourself,
that's
you
good,
created, now it's like you're in a different spot. Like now, like you don't even have to have meaning if you don't want to. Like I try to take away the meaning from my own sort of perspective because that's too subjective. Like I just want to be with it. But you are empowered now. Like the mystification of like where all of the woo comes from, like you get it. But you can still rest upon the mystery and the beauty of life. And you can see like there are these constant like connections, like in any given moment, I can make a connection. I can create bookends, and those bookends create polar, positive and negative endpoints for which the torus field of life, you know, unfolds around. This to me is like the real power of astromonia. Like,
Brilliant.
and it ultimately comes down to what I call the inner calendar. You and me, all of us have first 8 what I call personal holy days, and those are defined by like the date correspondence of your birth chart with the calendar date, and it doesn't change year to year, just like your birthday doesn't change year to year. It's always December 31st, but it's also when the sun returns to 10 degrees Capricorn. If you were to go and look every year on your birthday, the sun is at the same place. That's why they call it a solar return. You've got other things that happens. When you know your inner calendar, when you have these other dates in this 365-day cycle, which we call years, and you know when these dates happen, and you put it in your day timer, and you take a moment out of your schedule, and you recognize that this is occurring, what you're doing is you're doing it for the practice. You're not necessarily doing it for the payoff. This is why it's called a practice. Whatever your practice is, if you got a meditation practice, you got a yoga practice, you got a nighttime ritual. Like the practice means I do it because doing it has in itself is the benefit, is the payoff. When your practice is like, I recognize this moment outside of the constant unflowing of life, like I'm going to take a break out of time to just breathe and have awareness. You are creating, you are establishing, you are seeing your bookends. And you can see them as just different pieces, just like this Aikido master who breaks this move into smaller and smaller pieces. You're doing the same thing, and you're recognizing, and you're doing it in alignment with an objective reality of time and space. And what that does is it puts you more deeply in alignment with what? With the unfoldment of time and space and this friggin' mystery. And it's done outside of the paradigm. Brilliant. That's what I wanted to talk to you about today, is like this idea of a return to this level of practice. Then if you want to go and add meaning, if you're still into astrology and you're like, okay, well, can you interpret that for me? Will you interpret what these aspects mean or what this sign means? Well, then, yeah. Well, then I think that someone has demonstrated a groundedness in terms of being able to receive this information. But right now what's happening is everyone's just getting the goods, they're getting the dessert, and they haven't they haven't built the structure to really understand where this comes from, where the subjective interpretations come from.
When you were doing this yourself, I presume you were mapping this out yourself, your internal map. Did you see some cycles, like repetitive stuff happening? Were you able to recognize times where you were probably better to rest or stay low or be more creative, or was there any of those things that you would recognize?
My personal take is I go the other way around. There are a couple key like dates and moments which I am aware of, but for the most part, I allow life to dictate to me themes. So things that show up in my experiential life, when I begin to identify those patterns, then I'll probably go look at like the astromonia or the astrology or the movement of the celestial realms. But I personally am more comfortable in a fluidic expression, which means like I'm just going to go about life. I allow like life to move me, and then I'm very aware of what comes in and out of my life, and I've put in enough. I've demonstrated to myself enough of a development of understanding structures and time that I can do that without just being like someone who's blown around by the wind. I've established certain structures in the.
Yeah.
So that's my take. That's my approach. So I mean, I make a lot of videos, and I'm certain you've seen those videos. And a lot of the videos which I make are ultimately me telling my stories, like the stories of the events that I've experienced in life. And for the most part, from my own internal, why do I do it, is I'm trying to demonstrate an interconnectivity of like life. Like it's all connected. There are these cycles. And if you actually pay attention, like you'll see how these cycles are all around us. And the more you become aware of the cycles, the more they flow with less friction.
Yeah.
And let me just go and define. I used electric and magnetic a little bit earlier in this conversation. Electricity and magnetism are inherently related. Like that's just like the study of electromagnetism talks about it. And so they're like two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other. And we can see the nuanced differences between electricity and magnetism. And what we see with electricity is that there's heat, or the heat is a byproduct of friction. Like how electricity expresses itself is it creates heat and friction, which ultimately leads to a decay.
Yeah.
So when I say electrically dominant, it refers to something which has heat. And this isn't like a judgment call, like good or bad. It's a recognition, a discernment call that electricity is any type of expression which has heat, which has friction, which implies it's not sustainable. It will eventually burn itself out and needs to burn on something else.
Yeah.
Or it's magnetic. And by definition, magnetism is cool and does not have friction, which implies a level of self-perpetualness. And so when they talk about like cold fusion, for example, or the self-perpetuating machine, it's this idea of it being, metaphorically or even literally magnetically driven, that there's not friction. And so my experience when one begins to recognize the cycles of life, you're moving your experience with life, or your consciousness, your approach with life, from to a more magnetic setting, which means like there's less friction. Life unfolds in greater easement.
Yeah.
It happens slower. Electric is faster than magnetic. When you talked about like finding the space, like speed, like slowing things down, that implies a movement towards magnetism, because if you're speeding things up, you're doing a movement towards electrical. But the paradox is it's always just the same thing anyway. That's where you can't get too solid on this, but you're like, I can go and surf this. So to me, all of this is like movement towards a magnetically dominant expression of your life, which means it happens with easefulness and not the heat of destruction.
It's a great tool for self-mastery then, isn't it?
Isn't that what practice is all about?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. It's fascinating, but how you've simplified it in that way.
Well, I've tried to, and I listen to the words, if being completely transparent, what I'm describing to you has been a desire within me to share this with outside of just myself. Like this is something to share. Has been there for probably at least 2 or 3 years, maybe even longer than that. It's been slowly become more and more refined as I've become more committed to it. But what I have discovered is like, whereas to me it does appear to be very simple, but it's because I've been doing it for so long that it is received often like it seems very, very complex, or it seems very, very abstract, like very, very conceptual. And it's anything but that. It's actually really simple, and it is very, very practical and timing as it relates to timing. But I've not found the loop with audiences. I've taught the class, I think 5 or 6 times right now. It's usually like a 6-week course. Like I haven't quite landed it yet. Like, and I feel that what I described to you today, like hopefully I've created some degree of clarity, but I've also realized like it's confusing to try to describe it. And so I'm immensely grateful to have an opportunity on your show to be able to talk about this, and for you to give me the space to kind of talk about something which might be hard to talk about. But what I really want to be able to do is share this and make what I think may have sounded very conceptual and very like confusing to people, like not make it confusing. So what I think I'll do for you is I'm going to give you your dates. Like I'll look at your chart, I'll give you your dates, and maybe like begin to share with you that's really the only way that this becomes like tangible, is like, okay, well, you did a good job explaining it to me. Like, what are my dates? What are my magic? And then you begin to lean into it, and you begin to do that as to a practice. And that practice is like right into your practice of self-mastery, which will be unique for each individual, but which is probably the ultimate direction we're all, at least those of us who are interested in this type of approach to experience. And that approach is like the mastery of self.
It's clearly that it's a real opportunity, I think, that to, because this is the thing where, you know, we've talked about this before on the previous one, being the curious adventurer is to kind of understand the realm we're in, but to understand the realm we're in, we need to understand who we are. And there's a map as well.
There is, yes, there is a map of time. And it's loose enough that you could do whatever you want with it. And it's tight enough that you can really understand. We've been given a mind which is capable of like really like precision sort of like mental things. Like we can do mathematical equations, or we could figure something out linearly. So we can apply that capability to this. Like that capability wouldn't be here unless it was to be used. And so where are the instances where you can apply it would be a question which I like to put out.
Where I would apply it.
Where would you apply it? Is that what you're throwing out there right now?
Yeah. So what? Yeah.
So
I mean, yeah. Go on, Mike. Sorry.
When you get the dates, every date has built into it a certain quality. And the quality is defined by how the date is defined. So what I mean by that is there is a date which is going to be directly related to the part of the sky as defined by the stars that was on that eastern horizon line when you were born. Okay? So so in astrology, they'll call that the rising or the ascendant. Okay?
Yeah.
If you were, that is where everything comes up. So the sun is birthed there, like the sun is not visible and then suddenly it becomes visible, and that's where it becomes visible. And the same is with the moon, the same thing. So that location has the quality associated with this is where everything rises. Like that's an objective truth. Like that, there's a subjective quality to it, but you could hear where I'm coming from. Like I'm kind of describing the essence.
It's measurable, isn't it? So
but in a subjective way. I'm using words like this is where the sun is born, and like you can be like, well, the sun's actually not born. It's an optical illusion that the sun is not visible. But you understand where I'm coming from, and it's subjective.
Yeah.
You didn't see the sun when it was nighttime, and now you do. So on that level, we've taken that concept of like being birthed, let's say, and we've tied it now to a date. And that date is unique to you. And that date is like, you can understand this like objective way of how we got that. So, okay, well, what do I do with this practice? Well, with that date, well, that is a date that corresponds with your relationship with when new things come in. Right? Isn't that what happens at that Eastern Horizon location? That's where things are born. Yeah. So now I tell you this, Anthony. This date is when you could take a moment at a time. At every given moment, at any given moment in your life is at least the potential for something new to come into it, right? Like that's always there. Like that's the truth. Yep. Like the present moment, anytime something can happen. But now we have a very, very specific present moment, which objectively has imbued into it the symbol of new things coming into your life. So now you're like, what are you going to do with it? So this is what I would suggest. So on that particular day, let's call that day November 15th. I'm going to call it November 15th. And on November 15th, if there's one day out of the year that you should witness the sunrise, if there's one day out of the year, that should be the day. Why? Because that's like the sunrise location for when you were born. So I'm like, all right, well, I want to make certain that day I'm going to see the sunrise. Nothing else other than that. I'm going to make certain I see the sunrise. And maybe, you know what? I'm going to do something that maybe embodies. Maybe I'll do this. I'll just like something that symbolizes newness. And I want to just recognize it. Maybe I even want to recognize it with gratitude or appreciation. That could be anything. Maybe that's a candle. Maybe I do a rebirthing ritual. Maybe I just sit there in meditation. Maybe I play a song. Maybe I do something all day. Maybe I launch something new that day. Maybe I actually do something new at that moment. Yeah. You get to decide that, but you've got enough of a detail or enough information where you can create your own sort of ritual. You have an objective time, and here you're the only one who cares. No one else. Yeah. If you were to go and tell someone, you'd be like, guess what? Tomorrow's my rising, my ascendant day. Tomorrow's my ascending day. They'll be like, I don't care. Like, you know, but that's what makes it so special is like, it's only between you. It's not a communal holiday. This is a holiday between you as an individual and with life itself. And you get to design it any way you want, and you get to bring whatever you want to it. So now, like, you know, you've put in your calendar, you've got 8 of these throughout the year, right?
Okay.
And you go and you see like, oh, wow. Like I'm looking at, like, I'm planning out what's going on in the next 2 weeks. You know, you're putting things in your day timer and you see written down, it's like, oh, November 15th, that's my ascendant date. And now you've taken a pause. You're like, oh, wow, what am I going to do? And then you start thinking about it. And you're like, well, I want to make certain, like the night before, because if I'm going to get up to make certain I have the sunrise, I'm going to make certain I go to bed early enough. And I got to make certain, like, I've got my day scheduled so that I can be somewhere on sunrise. And then you might even think like, well, where do I want to have that sunrise? Like, do I just want to go and see it in out my back porch? Or maybe I want to go somewhere. Maybe there's a place where I got a really good view of sunrise. But what happens is, and this is how all of life works, and this is the power of what we call holy days and like meaning. You've just built into like this thing, like an entire experience. And that carries you forward. You've taken a moment out of time. You've added something. You've got meaning You've got like end times. You've got all of this stuff, like, you know, this and that objectively, like think about how like Christmas, like the Christmas season objectively influences humanity. Like when we put ourselves through the lead up to a ritual event, and then we understand what it's all about. Christmas is all about like, you know, materialism and getting drunk and making bad decisions. And like 9 months later, that's when all the babies are made. But there's a truth to that, but you're beginning to add this into your life. Now, likewise, completely opposite in the solar cycle, you're going to have the same holiday for the Western horizon, the descendant location. And you're going to do that one at sunset. Why? Because it's the sunset location. And now sunset has a completely different feeling of what's being born. And now you're like, this is when I realized like there's a time like that things come to an end. You know, whether that's a person, whether that's an event, whether that's like I'm just going to bed, but you have an actual moment in time where you have an opportunity to recognize, to fold back with awareness of this sort of stuff. And so this is just you, as everyone's got these. Everyone has these, and these dates are kind of special. They're kind of secret, but they're universal. And if you can stagger them throughout your year, 8 of them, now you have this thing like this is what the holiday seasons are all about. And like they're different, and like you rise and you fall and all of these different things. And so now that you've put this into a practice, now that you put things into practice, what you've actually done is you have taken your lived life, your living life, and you have integrated it with the nonstop movement of life as defined by the celestial realm, and you get it, and you're doing it. You're not making a big deal out of it. You're not like, you know, you're not forcing anyone else into it. It's whatever you want it to be, but you're actually using that as like a foundation. And that is a real, now think about that, like just, you're not doing it for any payoff other than doing it. And think about like the quality. Imagine you did an entire year and you've had that practice, and like what that has brought in, like if you can, you know, imagine like an articulation of like how that may have changed you or what that has added to your inner experience. And then compare that to the person who, like, this would all seem like nonsense. Why the hell would I do that? What's the payoff? Who doesn't see any of the value of that. And if you would say something like, there's no such thing as Monday to them, they would think that you're insane, and they would argue with you exactly why Monday exists. But there's a difference between the consciousness of those two individuals. And in that difference is where you create the space for something outside of the paradigm to happen. Or maybe even another way, where the paradigm begins to render itself around you.
Nice.
That's
and it's
it.
Beautifully unique as well to every individual on this planet. It's beautiful.
So this is what I like to do. Like I'm looking at the time, I'm looking at the clock time, and there I know like my next event is coming up. So
yes.
For anyone who has watched this, you know, there's a couple things like this. On a certain level, this is really important study. If you've studied astrology before, like the course which I currently don't have any scheduled right now, but I have recordings of the course. It's 6.5 hours, 420 amazing slides. I'm great with the visuals, but it is conspiracy, history, consciousness, astrology, and astronomy. And it kind of like, you know, this is what you have never been taught. So if you know astrology, like this is going to be your missing piece. Or if you're intrigued by it, this is like your foundation. So that is a possibility. And the other thing, which is a possibility, is like, if you just want me to give you your dates, like I can do that, no problem. Like, you know, those are both services which I have. And this is the way which I work through the paradigm. Anyone who's interested, they can reach out. And if someone who's really interested, like I work with people one-on-one, like with their charts, both mapping their inner landscape. So what it actually means, like this is what usually people think astrology is about. And there is a truth to it, is understanding your inner world, your inner world. and then learning how that ties into time and space, and then how to move beyond it, because you're much beyond your astrology. So I want to throw that out there for everyone, that if this resonated, that this conversation, like, and if you're interested in more, that could be a way which more can show itself for you.
And I'll make sure your contact details are in the show notes so they can reach out to you.
Please do.
I know you've got to go, but there's something I want to share with you before you go.
All right.
So I know that you make arrows, yeah?
Oh yeah.
You beautiful arrows, yeah, that you do. Okay, so my wife, when I had the breakdown a few years ago, she started making these beautiful wands. So she would go into the woods. She would find sticks that felt right for her. And there's some great details. They're all different. They're all unique. You know, they're all unique in their own way. And she would make these, and sometimes she'd inscribe light codes into them. Or well,
can I see the other end?
So the other end's it's more of a wand, so it's just a way to grab.
Okay.
And then she would decorate. She would put crystals in there. She would inscribe them, but she would put her energy into everything. They're all handly crafted and all beautiful. Now, I was talking to my wife before our conversation, and also after we spoke the first time, and how we got along, you know, really well. And she wants to make you one of these, Mike, and send you one. No, as we mentioned off camera, she's not doing very well at the moment, but she's feeling very creative. So if you were happy to receive, she is prepared to put some energy into this and create you a wand, and we'll get your address and send that to you.
I would be honored to receive such a thing.
Okay.
And I would love to, like, I can tell just by looking at it that the camera doesn't do justice for like the subtleties and texture and all this stuff.
Yeah,
so I would love to see the work, and then particularly prior to our recording, you shared with me, you know, off air a little bit about you know, your relationship and your wife, and so like I've got a picture of her in my mind, like I've created something. So like this is a feedback loop for me. I would love to see some of her creative energy and what she makes with her own hands. So yeah, thank you very much.
You're more than welcome, brother. You're more than welcome. And thank you so much again for your time. And I hope we can do this again.
Definitely.
You know, it would be always an honor to have you on the show and to chat. I learned so much from you.
Send me your birth information. So that would be the birth date, location, and time. And I will, I'll pump out some dates for you, and I'll explain to you, I'll give you some general guidance on how to apply that information in a that would be great.
I appreciate that a great deal, Mike, and I appreciate you as always. And I will be in touch soon regarding the wand and everything else.
Fantastic.
And, you look after yourself. Keep doing the great work that you're doing, and we'll make sure all your details are in the show notes. If you're interested in learning more, then please contact Mike straight away.
All right.
Take care, brother.